Welcome to the Ex Good Girl podcast, the place where people pleasers, perfectionists, and overgivers come to unlearn the good girl rules that you thought were making you good, but now you can see are actually just keeping you small. If you've spent your life being unable to say no, putting everyone else's needs and feelings above your own, constantly seeking external approval, or avoiding conflict to make others feel comfortable, if guilt and resentment feel like a constant weight in your life, it is time to learn to knock that shit off. Every episode, we dive into the stories, skills, and strategies that you need to stop shrinking, start speaking up, and to live a life that is authentically and unapologetically yours, while also deepening the connection and vulnerability in the relationships that matter to you. I'm glad you're here. Let's jump in. This interview that you're about to hear with the amazing Dr. Kelly Casperson is one that I've been looking forward to for a long time. She is not only a very funny and real person on Instagram, maybe you follow her, if not, you should, but she is a urologist with a special focus on how perimenopause affects female sex organs, female sexual drive. Although she works with men and women, she really is a voice in this current moment that perimenopause is having. So listen up, because we talk about some of the specific things that women can do to become the partners that some of our doctors need us to be as we navigate perimenopause in this periods of our lives. If you haven't listened to last week's episode, be sure and do that too, because I go into more detail in that episode about how to become the partner that your doctor needs so that you can feel better during perimenopause. Enjoy. Here we go. I have been looking forward to this episode all week. I had a hard time settling down last night because this is my biggest podcast fangirl moment with you, Dr. Casperson. Hello, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It is such a pleasure. Menopause is finally having its moment. Long overdue. What is your story, and how did you get involved in this moment?
Yeah, well, I always joke that sex got me into menopause. And the reason for that is I'm a urologist, and urologists, for people who don't know, are surgeons of the genital urinary system: kidneys, bladder, ureters, scrotum, testicles, vulva, vagina. And we take care of the men, but we do also take care of women. A lot of people don't know that. And about 7 years in, I got the fortunate life-changing event of a patient coming into my office complaining of low sexual desire, and I didn't know how to help her. And so everything I was told was women were too difficult, we'll never figure them out, don't worry, the gynecologists are taking care of them. Like, that was what I was taught in training, and I just started to question it all and be like, is that true? And learned a ton about female sexual health, enough to start a podcast, enough to write a book, because I'm like, the world isn't getting this information out. Hollywood is going against this information. Society is going against this information, and people are actually researching this to try to make women's lives better. So I was, doing my thing as the female sexual function expert, and people kept saying, well, you know what happens in menopause with your sex life. And I'm like, and they're like, well, yeah, but you know what happens. And I'm like, and they're like, yeah, but you know what happens. And I'm like, good Lord, like, this is on repeat and I'm staring down the barrel at this thing. Like, what happens? And so I did the same sort of thing, deep dive. How is estrogen and testosterone influence your sex life? Why are they important? Oh, turns out hormones are incredibly important. Okay, why is everybody afraid of them? Right. And then went into the WHI and the flawed studies on medications we don't even use anymore, and just going down the data of like, how is it possible in the current state that we're actually afraid of something that our body naturally makes? And how does that get perpetuated into the ether, basically? Because women will be like, I'm afraid of hormones. And I'm like, oh, why? I just act dumb, right? I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, because it causes cancer. And I'm like, oh, where'd you hear that from? And they're like, I don't know. Right. And so it's like the fear is so pervasive that you don't even know where it came from. It's just truth. Right. And like, how do you do that? How do you oppress a group of people by keeping them afraid? And how do you do that successfully for 20 years? right? And then what happens when you actually educate women and empower them and let them make the choice over their body? This is body autonomy. You want to be on hormones safely, you should be allowed to be on hormones safely. And how do you empower them to do that? And then you watch them thrive, right? And it's like my favorite part of my day is when a woman comes back and she's like, I feel like myself again. I feel like I haven't felt in 10 years. And it's like my job is to make smart women go out and change the world in their ways. And so that's like my journey is like you just keep peeling back the onion layers and you realize like, oh my God, the only way out of this is education.
Which is such an interesting thing to say, because there is so much of the good girl rules that keep us from that. No, keep us from knowing about our body, keep us from knowing the difference between a vagina and a vulva, keep us from understanding that hormones are something that our body naturally makes. And what do you think are some of the most egregious, when we talk about those good girl rules, what are some of the good girl rules that you see like limiting women's ability to get themselves educated?
I mean, you don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
Right. It's like you've just been you've been following the rules, pleasing others, doing the right thing, don't rock the boat. And you're like, who the hell am I?
Yeah.
Right? You don't even know yourself. You've just been responding in the way you think you're, air quotes appropriate is. And it's like, are you authentically even yourself? And that's a very big question to try to solve on a podcast. But if it wakes somebody up to be like, I don't know me, and be like, yeah, it's better for society that way, my friend. Like it's not better for you, but it's
Yeah.
better for society that way.
And around
Welcome to the Matrix.
Yeah. And around sex in particular, right? If I am taught from the time I am born that my body is supposed to look like something for someone else, that I am supposed to engage with my sexual experiences from the lens of, is my partner happy? Are they getting what they want? Then it just follows to me that my whole focus is outward. Are other people liking this? Am I keeping other people happy? Am I being grateful enough for what I get? Am I being strong and just enduring what is put on me? Am I being nice and not demanding or angry? All of those rules are coming into play in the very situation that I had, which was sitting in front of my male doctor and asking him about some of these issues, and him telling me, we don't do that kind of medicine here, quote unquote, that kind of medicine. And then me not knowing what to do next. I'm like, well, my doctor said no. So now what do I do? It is just such a cycle to break, not only these rules, but to understand that our access to our own bodies and our own and knowing about them has been controlled by patriarchy from the beginning of time, right? From the time that Eve's blamed for eating the apple that plunges all of us into this evil world, and she's fallen and she can't be trusted, and so her body can't be trusted, and women can't be trusted to know about their own bodies.
Yeah, no, the whole thing's crazy. Absolutely crazy. And, in medicine, it's like, people are they put all this weight on the gynecologists to like, oh, go to your gynecologist, go to your gynecologist, and it's like, step back from that for one hot second. 51% of humans are female. There's 22,000 gynecologists in this country. There's 80 million women over the age of 40. Like, if you think that the gynecologist knows everything about the female body, that's not true. They know how to deliver babies. They know how to stop heavy bleeding. They can do hysterectomies, right? But to think that they are the sole people in charge of 80 million humans, right? And what we've really done is we've been like, that's for the women. The women get the 22,000 doctors who have to do all those other things, by the way. And like, and don't get me wrong, there's great family medicine, there's great internal medicine, but it's like everybody needs to know how these bodies work. Female is not a niche.
That's so significant, because what my brain was doing where you were saying that is, but I thought that's what my gynecologist did, right? So there is such a lack of information. Where would you, if you are a woman who is either just coming into this menopause moment, either because of the cultural information that's now out there and available, or they're noticing some things going on with their body that don't feel right or don't feel the same as they did a few years ago, where would you suggest that they start?
Start with your primary care doctor. And if you don't have a primary care doctor, get a primary care doctor. Like, the statistics on not even having anybody to help you navigate the system is staggering. And the younger the people get, like Gen Z, they hardly have primary care doctors, right? I understand it's a tough ask, right? But it's like having a relationship, the doctor-patient relationship is holy and precious and being eroded minute by minute in this for-profit, you know, it's not about the doctor-patient relationship anymore. And so really, if I get my way, which I'm hoping that's what you asked, is like have a relationship with somebody that even if they can't do the hormones for you, they know who can, and they can help guide you. And most importantly, they can rule out other things. Like, is it your thyroid? Is it diabetes? Like, there can still be a ton of things besides it being your hormones, and you still need all of that looked at too. So I would say start with primary care.
You mentioned something called the vag estrogen test.
Oh
Does
yeah,
that
yeah. Like, you go to the doctor and you're like, basically you ask them like, hey, are you cool with vaginal estrogen in menopause, right? And if they like don't know what that is, or they say they don't believe in it or something like that, like that's a good sign that they're not paying attention to women's health and hormones, because like vaginal estrogen is such a low hanging fruit. Like, it's so safe. It's such preventative medicine. It's good for all the bladder, most of the bladder and sexual health issues, that like if they can't even do that or prescribe that, or they don't think that's safe, it's a good marker that they don't know much about perimenopause and menopause. Because that's like one of the most universally agreed upon things.
okay? So if your doctor doesn't support vaginal estrogen, it might be time to
Ask who does. It's
ask
like
who
if,
does.
if you if you like the doctor, keep them around for when you get pink eye and you throw out your shoulder, and like it's you don't discard the baby with the bathwater. But that might not be your person for your hormone journey.
It's interesting. For a while, it has kind of felt like it's me and my sisters and my friends and some TikTok videos who are trying to educate ourselves here. And I actually think that is a great source of information. It has really kind of equalized access to a lot of great people like yourself, doctors, and other clinicians who are really breaking down specific studies, specific science, and specific education that women need to know so that we can become the equal partners in our own medical journey. That I think really is best when you go into menopause, because you are educated and you do know. Are
Yeah, I
there
mean,
some? Go ahead. Yeah.
I was gonna say the biggest myth about menopause is that it's hot flashes and no periods, and that you get over menopause, right? Like,
Yeah.
anybody who says they get over menopause that's another good test. They fundamentally don't understand that this is a profound hormone change, profound hormone decline. Some people don't even like the word decline, but I'm like, listen, if your estrogen's 2, what do you want me to call that? Right? Like, it's a decline compared to what it was when you were having normal cycles. So, but some people, like, they don't even like the word. And I'm like, fine, find the word that you like, meaning you have like 0 hormones compared to what you had in your 30s. But yeah, if you think like, so many women, especially the boomers, they're like, "Oh, I'm over menopause. That was 20 years ago." It's like, "No, no, no. Your estrogen's still 0. Your body is still changing because it has an estrogen of 0." And thinking about your body that way, instead of like it's some severe symptoms that do some, oftentimes get better with time, is like osteoporosis doesn't get better, your brain changes don't get better, your cardiovascular system's not getting better, your gut microbiome's not getting better, your vaginal skin's not getting better, right? Like, there's no over menopause. So if somebody says something like that, you're like, okay, they don't know what this actually is.
Such a good point. Let me ask you just a couple basic vocabulary questions then. Perimenopause, how would you define it? And is it different from menopause?
Yeah, perimenopause is the years up to menopause. So menopause is 1 year of having no natural periods, which is tricky because a third of women don't have periods, right? They've got hysterectomies, IUDs, uterine ablations. So it's a kind of a crappy marker anyways. But so perimenopause tends to be I'm still cycling, or maybe I have an IUD in, so I don't know. Um, if you are still cycling, your periods start to become erratic. They're either really spaced out or really close together or really heavy or really light. And so it's the time when your ovaries are starting to go offline and the brain's trying to get the ovary to do as much as it can. So it will really try to kick the ovary into gear. So you can have really high estrogen, really low estrogen. Perimenopause is a roller coaster, whereas menopause is now flatline. No more cycling, offline.
And the symptoms that come online during perimenopause, what happens to those symptoms during menopause?
Different for everybody. Different for everybody. I mean, the classic symptoms. So classic means like I guess the most known, but it's not even the most common, right? So classic would be hot flashes, night sweats. But also very common is aches and pains, joint pain, muscle aches, bone pain, what we call the musculoskeletal syndrome of menopause. Women are just told they're getting old, right? And then you throw an estrogen patch on them and they're like, oh my God, that got better. And you're like, yeah, no, that was low hormones in your joints, right? That's why you hurt. So that's super common. Overactive bladder, more recurrent urinary tract infections, lots and lots of things. Sleep is horrifically erratic, perimenopause, menopause. So really, I mean, the only difference is that lack of periods kind of is the marker or transition between perimenopause and menopause. Again, because menopause is defined as a year with no natural periods. But there's nothing magical about that, right? Nothing happens the day after a year or the day before the year. It's made up for definition purposes.
And the reason that none of that really changes is because your hormones are still declining or flatlining, and you might continue to have some of the symptoms you had during perimenopause. They might get better, they might get worse. It just depends on the person.
Yeah, depends upon the person.
Yeah.
But we know, the dogma used to be like, oh, it's just some hot flashes and you'll get better. It'll get better. And it's like, sometimes it's like 40 hot flashes a day. It's very severe. And then for some people, hot flashes continue for 10 years or more. So there isn't this like the worst thing I think a woman can do to another woman. Well, not the worst thing, but in menopause, one of the things is like, I did great. Right? Like really dismissing somebody else's experience because you didn't have that experience is like, there's no gold medal for sailing through this. Right. And then like when a woman says this is what's happening, I believe them.
It's so interesting because I had a uterine ablation at 38, and I was having very erratic, irregular periods that just kind of didn't seem to want to stop. And I had the ablation. I had a great relationship with my OB, and no one told me, hey, you are going to want to keep track of what happens to your body. This is the start of perimenopause for you. And so I watched myself.
Perimenopause. Irregular bleeding, perimenopause.
Yeah. And no one said a word. And so I watched myself just decline for the next almost 12 years. I got to the point where I had myself tested for early onset dementia.
Oh my God.
Because I was like, this isn't work. My brain isn't working anymore. There are words that I used to know. And I said it sometimes jokingly. It was absolutely not a joke to my husband. I'm like, remember when I used to be smart?
Ooh.
Remember when I used to be like smart and intelligent and I could be curious and delve into a lot of these things. And so what you are saying and the work you are doing, first of all, I think for a lot of women, there is a very understandable grief and sadness and rage about the time lost, about not understanding. I feel some of that. Mm-hmm. And I see that in some of the clients that I work with, and just, the women that are kind of in my sphere. And so I just want to acknowledge that the very same time that we're dealing with a lot of these symptoms, we are dealing with the result of these symptoms, which is kind of a lack of resilience. Like your get up and go seems to have got up and left. And this is a time when you have to be taking control of a lot of aspects of your personal health and education. And yet because of your hormone reserves, it's the time when it is least available to you.
Totally. And it's like, women quit jobs, the divorce rate skyrockets, mental health issues
Yeah.
skyrocket. And it's like, dude, they're the big elephant in the room is that the universal theme is everybody's ovaries are going offline and nobody's addressing them. It's like, I wish ovaries were hanging out like testicles. It'd be a lot easier to pay attention to, but you can't see it, right? You can't see it, and it's very real. So what did you do? Did you are you on hormones? Like, how did you get to feeling better?
I started hormones about a year ago, and I'm 51.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
so
God.
it,
Were you like, oh my God?
yes. I mean,
Like
someone,
I'm putting you on the spot on your podcast.
no,
Sorry.
no, 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 not at all. I am totally fine being put on the spot. No, I was like, oh, what? Perimenopause? Like, I honestly thought that's something like 55 and older. Like, that's when I should be
Right.
looking for it.
Everybody thinks menopause is like the golden girls with like white hair.
A
And like
hundred percent.
it's not. Like at 38, you could have gone on hormones.
Yeah. And I have to like not cry about that
Yeah.
because, and actually what started it was at the beginning of not this year, but the year before. I was like, I am like, actually, I'm not a depressed person. I'm usually happy and optimistic. And I can usually, like, depression just hasn't been a part of my profile, but I was depressed looking at the state of my body. And for the first time, I was also diagnosed with ADHD because I noticed like this gradual decline over 12 years. It seemed like it just went off a cliff, and I just could not make my brain do a goddamn thing. And I went and got tested for ADHD because I was going through testing with one of my kids, and I was like, some of this feels a little familiar. And then I got on some ADHD medicine that didn't work very well. And then I told my nurse psychiatrist, I think I'm depressed. And she was the one who said, have you thought about could be connected to perimenopause? And I was like,
Oh, what a good person.
yes. Yes. And I've told her that I want to kiss her, but that I won't because it would violate something. But yes. And so that's when that's when I went back to my OB, and he's like, we don't do that kind of medicine here. And I was like, okay, you mean the kind of medicine that takes care of me? Okay, fine. Well, who does? And then it's a little bit of a search. Can you talk a little bit about how you see women go through that search and how they might best prepare themselves to find that partner that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so what happened, just to back up and to explain to people like why don't doctors know, right? Because it's pretty upsetting to find out that they don't know about something 51% of the whole population goes through. Is in 2002 when the Women's Health Initiative study dropped and the media took it and basically started women's health on fire, is they said estrogen causes cancer. And at that time in the 90s, 40% of women were on the then most common prescription for hormones, which was Premarin. So 40% of women in the 90s were on estrogen. Like today, the study just came out at the Menopause Society meeting, 1.8% of women are.
Just want to cry.
I know the crazy thing about it is like, dude, we're not trying to do anything that we weren't already doing before.
Right.
Right? Like we knew these medications were useful. We knew they were helpful. We knew women did well. The Iron Curtain fell down. And then what happened is we had 2 decades of doctors, nurse practitioners, PAs, healthcare providers not be trained. Right. And not only not be trained, basically saying, hey, we don't have anything for this. And furthermore, what we do have kills you, which now is not true. For anybody who didn't get the memo, estrogen does not cause breast cancer. And so now we have women who are getting educated on podcasts, on blogs, on Instagram, however they're getting educated, and they're going in, and doctors are changing because women are coming in and asking for it. And they're like, I better figure this out because I had like 10 women in this week asking for hormones, right? That's how this is changing, which I say is the best way. because if you had to wait for all medical schools to turn the tides on this, that's going to take another 20 years. And Gen X is simply not willing to wait. But that's why you need to explain to people why doctors don't know how. It's not because they don't care. It's not because they're stupid. It's because we literally stopped training doctors after the Women's Health Initiative. And it's going to take a little bit to right the ship, but it's happening. It's happening pretty fast. It's happening to the point where like there's medication shortages because they're not keeping up with the demand for it. But start with primary care doctor, and then a lot of women will go to who their friend goes to, right? So that's a good way. There's a lot of online clinics now that specialize just in hormones. So Alloy is a great one. Evernow, MIDI, Joy, um, Interlude is for vaginal estrogen only. So lots of different online companies that do telehealth. So that's where you go for your hormones. Some of them take insurance, not all of them do. Um, see which one you like. But to me, I'm like, it should be inexpensive, because if you are lucky, you're going to live 40 years, right? And you need to give yourself hormones the whole time if you want to continue reaping the benefits of hormones. So find some place that you like, get on something that you like, and understand that it does take some adjustment sometimes, right? Especially if you're taking hormones in perimenopause, because stuff changes, right? That ovary is fluctuating towards off.
Yeah. I'll just throw one other thing kind of in the mix of this conversation. It blew my mind to learn that it wasn't until 1993, when I had already graduated from high school, that it was mandated to include women's bodies in clinical trials, and that the trials that had been done on bodies before were men's, trying to figure out women's bodies. And you said it, but I'll just reemphasize it. Women's bodies were considered too hormonal, too unpredictable, too difficult to study. And so a lot of even the studies on medication and things that happened before the WHO study were still all done on men. That is changing a lot.
Yeah,
There's a lot of good things happen.
The thalidomide problem was a big problem, right? So this is a medication that was untested, given to women for nausea with pregnancy, and had devastating effects on the babies. And so that really, again, it's like I love medical history, right? Of understanding where did that come from? Why was there a ban on testing, right? It was for a seemingly good reason. But then you realize, well, women are going to get hurt more because we've only tested this on male bodies, and women have different metabolism. They have different body weights. They have different, lean body mass percentages, which influences metabolism. And like, statins weren't really tested on women. The sleep pills, right, have much higher risk in women than men. They weren't tested on women. And so really understanding, like, a lot of medications you take had like the classic one right now is looking at there's a medication for female low desire. It's called hypoactive sexual desire. So it's a pill you take at night, and it's called Addyi or flibanserin. And what they did was they got a whole bunch of men drunk on like a half a bottle to a bottle of wine at 9 a.m. on an empty stomach. And then they told women that they shouldn't drink when on this medication. And it's like, men getting wasted on a bottle of wine on an empty stomach at 9 in the morning is how you banned this drug from women taking, and having a glass of wine with dinner. So once you know things, you just realize, like, oh my gosh, the world's crazy. They've subsequently removed the alcohol ban for that medication, because they're like, most women aren't drinking a half a bottle to a bottle of wine prior to 9 a.m. on an empty stomach while taking this medication. You're like, who we are studying, is that real life?
Is that who this is made for?
Yeah.
Yeah. One of, I watched, go ahead.
I was going to say, the myth of that medication to this day is that you can't drink on it, which is not true. It's like, with most medications, you're supposed to limit your alcohol, like all antidepressants, for example, and anti-anxiety meds. But you can take up to 2 glasses of wine or alcohol, and then if you take more than 2, hold your dose, right? But that crappy study at getting men drunk before 9 a.m. on a full bottle of wine still limits women from getting this medication, because they still think there's this huge stigma. And it's like, no, it got removed, but it takes a while to change practice, you know?
And I think just accepting the fact that we are in that time frame of when things are changing, when we have to step up and take a larger role than we might have been conditioned that we need to take, right? There are a lot of women who still think they don't want to be difficult or demanding. And so asking for extra testing, asking for their doctor to look into this or that aspect of their own, perimenopausal symptoms is still hard for a lot of women who have
Yeah.
been really conditioned to not rock the boat.
Yeah, one thing I see a lot is, a woman will come in to see me, and it's no coincidence people come to see the urologist 6 months after their hormones have been stopped, right? Because the bladder goes nuts and UTIs happen and all the urology things. And they're like, "Oh, they stopped my hormones." And I'm like, "Why?" And they're like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "You didn't ask why?" And it's very easy for me to say, like, I'm a physician, right? Like,
Yeah.
these people do not intimidate me. I'm smart, if not smarter than most of them. So like it doesn't cross my mind to not ask these people why this decision was made, right? But like for the average person, when there's it's a power differential, doctor knows best, right? They don't even know why it was stopped. I'm like, dude, this affects your body. You should know why. And plus I need to know why because I need to realize, is that a valid reason for you to stop hormones, or can we put you back on your hormones? Like I need the why matters for multiple reasons. So that would be my pro tip, is like when you change things, understand why. There's like that's your right to understand. Well, you're the one who's swallowing the medication.
That is such an interesting intersection where, those good girl rules show up and have actual, like, concrete negative effects in women's lives, is when they don't feel like they can ask why and keep asking until they understand it, until they are satisfied that they have an answer. And I think some barriers to that. I think one time my doctor was very honest with me and he said, I've got like 11 minutes with you. Right. And so the way the medical system is set up, the way that there are some medical professionals who really unintentionally reinforce those good girl rules by uh, limiting the amount of information that they are willing to give patients. I don't think that's all doctors. I absolutely agree with you that doctors want to do what's right and they want to do what is good and they want to help people. That's why they became, doctors in the first place. It's I think on us, the patients, to do some of the work to become educated and to know what it is that we are trying to accomplish, and then to really work with the discomfort that we feel when we feel like he's going to think I'm demanding, he's going to think I'm being difficult,
Yeah.
he's going to think that I'm trying, being a burden.
Do you know Chris Voss? Never Split the Difference?
No.
Read it. It would be good for your good girl stuff. So his tip for that is to get on top of it. I know you're probably gonna think I'm demanding, but would it be possible to check some labs? Because if you label it and put it out there, the other person listening usually wants to be like, no, you're not demanding. Right? Read the book, Never Split the Difference. It's fantastic on negotiating skills.
Love it. That's such a great tip. The other way I say it is kind of similar, is this might come across to you as demanding, but it matters to me because this is my body and I'm the one swallowing the pills, to grab the phrase
Yep.
you just said.
Yep.
And that can sometimes make the
It
conversation
works.
easier. Yeah. One of my favorite lines in the M Factor that you said is, we think of sex as extra.
Yeah.
It's like this luxury that we have it while we have it. And once it's gone, oh, well, that was nice. We enjoyed that while we had it.
Yep. Oh, totally. I mean, how true is that, right? The only difference that might be is like the gender differences. For men, it's never considered extra. It's considered part of the oxygen, right? That's
Yeah.
essential. To the point where it damages them, right? Like their
Yeah.
stereotype is like, you should be turned on all the time and your penis should get hard all the time. And if it doesn't, I'm going to threaten your definition of manhood. Right. So like
Yes.
it's like sexuality is ingrained in them, but that hurts them also. Whereas for women, it's like extra, and only certain people are allowed to be sexual, right? Your body has to function a certain way. Disabled people aren't allowed a sexuality. Old people aren't allowed a sexuality. maybe unmarried people aren't allowed a sexuality. So there's a very narrow definition of who is deemed worthy of having a sex life.
That's so interesting. And all of, you're right, all of those things are just these commonly held cultural ideas. And when you go on in the M Factor and you say, we have eyes that when they wear out, we get glasses. When ears wear out, we get hearing aids. And you ask the question, why are we being so unique about ovaries? How do you see the symptoms around women's sexuality affecting them? Like, what should they be looking for in perimenopause?
Pain with sex, decreased lubrication, trouble with orgasm and arousal, low sexual desire. All of them. Those are all like all the domains. So if you look at the 4 domains of female sexuality, it's arousal, desire, pain is one of them, and orgasm. And so it's like all of those can be affected. But I think a lot of women, and this is not all women, but a lot of women, they're having mediocre sex to begin with. And then it just is like, oh, now you add a little bit of one of those problems and it's like game over. But then there's the other women who are having like amazing sex lives and they're like, hey, I'd like to keep this going. Like, I love my partner. I'm completely turned on by them, but like, oh, it just like feels like mushy broccoli now. Like, I'm just not in the mood. Like, they actually know something's changed. Whereas the women who kind of like were not having the greatest time anyways, they're kind of like, no, definitely not. Right. So that maybe I'm oversimplifying it by putting it into 2 groups of people. But those are like what I see the most in my clinic is either like, I know something's wrong because it was fabulous, or like it was never really good. And now with the addition of this problem, fuck it.
Yeah. It never being really good in the first place. I have a lot of friends and people that I know who are almost relieved that they now like have this this excuse, I guess, for not continuing a sex life. And I think that's so sad. And I think that is a direct, again, like if you look back at the way women are programmed around sex, to have it be about the other person, their pleasure, their orgasm, that they are getting what they want. There's a lot of women who just don't even know how to include themselves in that sexual equation where they are orgasming, they are receiving the amount of pleasure that they want from that.
Yeah. Like, when sex is a chore,
Yeah.
you don't desire to do your chores,
Yeah.
subsequently when sex is painful, you don't desire painful things. And that's really why I wrote the book, is because of our complete lack of adult sex education, we're in this pickle, right? And it's like, it wasn't even good and now you've got health problems, or it wasn't even that great and now, whatever, erectile dysfunction, menopause, a sore hip, like, things happen just as we age, whether or not it's hormone related or not. And it's like really reclaiming your identity as somebody that you're worthy of your own sex life. This is your sex life. You might share it with somebody, but it's your sex life. And you're like,
Yeah.
I didn't get that. We don't learn how to communicate. We don't learn that touching ourselves is good. That's a good girl thing. Don't touch yourself. Don't name the body parts. Instagram perpetuates that. We can't, the sex educators can't say body parts without getting fear of getting kicked off. So like our society continues to perpetuate this problem. Our bodies are not vulgar. They're body parts. Right. And perpetuating that there is a vulgarity to certain body parts is absolutely insane.
It's absolutely insane. And then not so insane. I mean, it's insane for today, but when you think about how all of the major world religions would designate a woman unclean during her cycle time, and some of that has changed in some of those world religions, and there are different sects and branches that do different things. But it was amazing to me to read about Buddhism and Judaism and Hinduism and Christianity and Islam all designating women's bodies unclean. So the vulgarity comes from these like really deeply rooted cultural and religious stories about women's bodies. When I read the introduction to your book, which is amazing, You Are Not Broken, it really gave me hope for having a different conversation about sex. Because I think if you would have talked to my grandma, sex was a duty, something that she had to do. If you would have talked to my mom, sex was not a duty, something that should be somewhat consensual, right? And if you talk to me and my friends now, sex is the thing that we want to enjoy for as long as possible. It's fun. It's not, it can be, all kinds of fun and pleasurable and bonding and show love and just be because we just want to have an orgasm.
Yep.
How how do you hope your book will contribute to that conversation?
Oh, this book allows people to talk about it, right? Because it's funny, it's approachable, it's not written with heavy medical stuff. So it's like a very user-friendly language for it. And then you realize like, oh, I didn't die talking about sex, right? And like learning, especially for people who are partnered with intimacy, is like talking about it actually makes your sex life better. And that's where intimacy can be created, right? Like, is like, I got a better sex life from doing all this research too, you realize. Like I help myself.
Yeah.
And it's like I spent, over 10 years married before I was like, "Oh, maybe I'll ask my husband what sex means to him." I'm like, "What's sex mean to you? Like what's, what do you get out of it? What's the point of it for you?" And he told me and I was like, huh, no shit. Right? It's like
Yeah.
you exist with this person and you don't even know what it means to them. And once you understand that, there's a lot more sympathy that happens of like, oh, that might be how your partner experiences love and connection, right? Whereas like the stereotype in a heterosexual couple of the woman's like, he just needs an orgasm, right? Like
Yeah.
women really dismiss males' need for intimacy. I think it's because they don't understand it. They've never asked the question. And the other thing that's super fascinating is like some people need to feel close to have sex. Some people have sex to be close. And usually those two people are living in the same house and they don't even know it. Right. And like once you realize that, and then you can be like, hey, I really want to like get a little bit closer. Right now I feel not super bonded. Let's bond a little bit and then I'll be super into having sex. Is like once you figure out how to navigate, like what do you need? Oh yeah, then we get sex when I feel close and what like, oh my God, communication is so good. And so that's what I want people to get out of it. Like I've this book saves marriages. It's the best thing ever.
Well, I am a third of the way through it. I agree. It reminded me of a funny conversation that I had with my husband once where we were talking about this, like, I have to feel close before sex. He has the sex to feel close. That's probably a somewhat typical dynamic. And um, I just said, honey, nothing makes me feel like having sex like you doing the dishes. And the look on his face of like, I don't understand that, but I'm going to believe you. And I'm going to step up the things that, because what I talked about at that time was like you taking some of the things that you see me doing, right? The mental load that I am carrying, which at that point we hadn't figured out really how to share very well. But it felt like a big turning point for us and better sex all around.
I know it's so good. There's a very what I think is a very important paper. It's called the heteronormative theory of low desire in women partnered with men. Sari Van Anders and Lori Brotto are two of the authors on it. And it basically breaks down the reasons that heterosexual women have low desire. And it's not, this is the, biopsychosocial is what sex is. This is not the bio part, it's not the hormone part. This is the psychosocial part of like an unequal work distribution at home, heteronormity rules about who's supposed to pursue, uh, proximity of you to the current and ever changing perfect female, and how well you think you line up to how sexy one is. Um, and then probably there's a fourth one I think is like another gender difference for something. But yeah, like that paper, I actually read that paper on my podcast a while ago and then interviewed one of the authors. And it's like so many women are like, oh, this is actually like a thing. This is like a social construct. There's like a reason that I have low desire when I'm partnered with a man. Like, it's crazy normalizing for people to be like, oh, it's not a me problem. It's not your personality flaw. It's not that you're inherently unattractive. Like, there are things that create low desire because of how our life is set up.
Because of those good girl rules and social and cultural norms about how my body should look, what it should do, what I should be doing with my free time. It is, what I love about the title of your book is something that I say to a lot of clients that I work with, because their fear is that there's something like extra special, super broken just about them.
Yeah. We're all terminally unique.
Terminally unique and terminally broken.
Yeah.
And
the other like funny, not funny, is women will fight for their brokenness. They're like, yeah, but I'm broken. No, but I'm really broken because of X, Y. I'm like, why are you hanging on to that? Like, thoughts are optional, right? Like,
yeah,
people are like, oh, you're gonna fight for your brokenness. All right, well, tell me how you're terminally unique.
that's such an interesting comment to make, just kind of in the context of this conversation, because all that time, energy, and effort that we spend fighting for our brokenness, reviewing all of our perceived, quote, air quotes, faults and weaknesses, comparing and contrasting our lives with other people, we could spend that time getting educated about this phase of life that we're in, the medicine that's available to us, the misconceptions that have been there, so that we can be that partner in this part of the medical journey.
That's right. Yeah.
For our family life.
What are you choosing to focus on? Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women that once they do learn, they listen to this podcast and they start realizing, like, or like you're like, holy shit, I spent over 10 years where I could have had an estrogen patch thrown on and maybe I'd, would have been functioning a little bit. Like, people get pissed, and it's like, remember, and that's okay. To me, I'm like, get pissed. Like, if you don't understand this, if this isn't upsetting, right? It's incredibly upsetting. And realizing that anger is energy, use that energy, use it for something, use it to create something, use it to educate another person. Like, because if you just sit in anger, that's toxic. But if you use the energy of anger to then create or to change or to build, it's incredibly powerful.
And specifically, I just wanted to read this sentence from the intro of your book, because I really loved it. You said, forget about reclaiming your sex drive. This is about claiming it, possibly for the first time ever. And I think a lot of the women that I see and work with, they have never had that great sex life and they want to claim it, or they've had it and it's changing and they want it to continue.
Yeah.
So good.
Oh, yeah. That's so good. And when you know, like, when sex is good, who is it? I'm blanking. It's a sex therapist, Barry something, and Barry McCarthy. Barry McCarthy, his big quote, I think it's in the book, is like, if you have a good relationship and your sex life is good, like, great, that sex life is adding another like 10% to your good relationship, right? But if you have a relationship and the sex life is bad, it can be devastating for that relationship. And I think the big untalked about is the amount of divorces that happen in midlife. 70% of divorces are started by the female, right? And so, like, it's this field like I want to learn more about, because I'm insanely curious about it. Like, some relationships should end. The time they've ran their course. You're different people. It's not your best life, but like, for the relationships that you don't want to end, what's the role of intimacy in keeping that? What's the role of hormones in keeping you healthy? Like, it's such an incredibly common but untouched phenomenon.
Yeah. My 2-second hot take right now is that you've often had, and I mean, I have 5 children. I grew up in a very religious, conservative denomination, and came out of all of that in my early 40s, mid 40s. And if I had not had a husband who was willing to kind of change with me, you're learning so much. Your life has been dedicated to other people for the first possibly 4 decades, almost 5 decades of your life. And all of a sudden you've just fucking had it. You've had it. And kids are leaving the house, your time is freeing up, or you're seeing how your time doesn't free up because you just have so many fucking things that you're responsible for, and all of the expectations, all of the disappointed people in your life because you've just had it and you're going to divorce them all.
Yep.
And that doesn't necessarily have to happen.
The fuck it 40s.
Yeah.
Right? Of like, which can be an incredible gift. Like people don't, I think, we love repetition and monotony and comfort, and we like things to stay the same. And it's like, no, there's a very big power of change afoot. I think driven a large part in because our hormones are changing, but also we're just getting wiser. We've just got more years under us. We're just, we think, brains think in a different way. We process information in a different way as brains age, because you're integrating all of this experience and be like, I'm not cool with this anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Like, or you start for the first time, realizing you're not going to live forever.
Yeah.
Right. Like the mortality starts kicking in, and it's like, you're going to get real clear about what you want to do. Otherwise you're going to be at the end of your life realizing you lived somebody else's life. Right.
100%.
So like, there's a huge opportunity for personal growth, which can be very frightening and very exciting all on the same day.
Yeah. I'm so grateful for your voice in this space. I'm so grateful for your willingness to do reels from your car when you're hot and sweaty, because that's what it really looks like, right? That's what this looks like. As we wrap up here, is there anything that you didn't get to say that you really just want to make sure gets said?
I'm kind of on this like body positivity kick right now. And it's always a nice reminder to people of like, you were, and I think this fits a lot with your good girl, stuff is like, we weren't born hating ourselves. We weren't born judging our bodies. We weren't born trying to be different than who we are. That was all created and put upon us by a culture that gets power by keeping us small and also gets money by selling us things. Right. And so like realizing that body negativity is a created social construct, and that it's yours to discard whenever you want to, and to be like, dude, this is your spacesuit, man. Like, this is all you have. And furthermore, if you've created children, even if you haven't, if your body can create life, you're a freaking miracle worker. Right. And so it's just this like, don't try to get to neutral, get to like effing awesome.
I love that.
We only have this for 80 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And without it, we don't have this. So it's really this like, I like just to say it whenever we can of like, don't aim not just for neutral, aim for like, this is amazing. And it's not perfect, because nobody's perfect. That's not the goal. The goal is
so
to
good.
Experience a life.
So good. And to experience the highest quality of life possible and the best access to the type of aging that is the best aging experience possible as well. So thank you so much for being a woman who is willing to speak out about this, and for coming on my podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening. If this podcast has been helpful to you, I would really appreciate it if you would give me a 5-star rating in whatever platform you listen to your podcasts. And if you go to my website, sarahfisk.coach, you can sign up there to receive my emails. Right now, I'm taking private one-to-one clients who want my help speeding up this work in their own lives. I really hope to provide a lot of free information on my website and in my podcast for people to do this work on their own. But if you're interested in having a coach like me to help you implement these things faster, to find the blind spots and obstacles that you're not aware of, go to my website and sign up for a consult. That's a time when you and I can get on Zoom and talk about the particulars of your situation, and I can show you how I could be helpful. The second thing you can do on my website is sign up for a freebie that I have called Difficult Conversations. Having a conversation that seems like it's going to be hard or difficult is one of the things that people pleasers struggle with. And so I've created a whole guide for you to be able to do that with some more confidence. That will also get you signed up for information about my group program, Stop People Pleasing. It's a group coaching program where you join a community of women just like you who are struggling to overcome perfectionating and people pleasing, and we do it together in a group. It's a really amazing opportunity to not just learn from your own experience, but just to see how similar you are to so many other women out there. The healing and the challenging and the laughing and the growth that happens in that beautiful community of women is really amazing. And if it's interesting to you, I would love for you to know about it.